James, you promised us you'd finish that story. You know the one. The one about Sarah Jane Valjean, Robert Cassette, the wealthy man who saves the day. The one that ends in misery. That story. Yeah. Allow me to introduce, if you haven't met him already, my twice great-grandfather Thomas. I've made videos about him before. He's a bit of a mystery. He disappears for 30 years and I can't find definitive proof of what happened to him. Sometimes I think I found him. In one of my previous videos I did reckon I had done that, but no, turns out I was wrong. Completely wrong. I don't know what happened to him between about 1842 and 1870. Just completely disappears from the records. But he's born in about 1836 on a farmhouse on the west coast of the Isle of Man. And there are stories around this farmhouse. 100 years later, up the road, there are reports of a talking mongoose. Don't ask about that one, but it's nothing to do with my family. And sometime around the time my family are living there, at this farmhouse, by the beach, it's overlooking the beach, it's a beautiful, beautiful spot, apart from the weird, crappy barn they've built there now, which, when I buy the place, I'm knocking that down. It's a beautiful spot, overlooking the sea, near a beach. Beautiful. And another family who's living nearby, living in the same sort of little enclave of farms, they start reporting mermaids. I'm not joking. I'm really not flipping joking. They're reporting that there are mermaids on the beach. There's a guy in the local paper who says, "Oh yeah, I saw this mermaid on the beach. I was walking along one day and I saw this mermaid lying on the sand. She'd been washed up. And she said to me, please sir, throw me back into the sea." So apparently this man just picks her up and throws her back into the sea. And she then says, "Thank you, kind sir, I'll make sure your family never drown." And apparently none of his family ever did. Now I'm not sure if my family was still living at the farm by this point in the middle of the 1840s, but the landowner, there's a big discovery made, a rare, valuable metal found on the farm, antimony. Super rare, super valuable. But of course they don't exploit it, because there's not enough there to exploit. Although there are reports going forwards that, yeah, there's the potential to mine for antimony at the farm. But of course by this point, my twice great-grandfather, Thomas, he's disappeared. And he doesn't surface again until 1870, or 1871, when it turns out that he's shacked up with a married woman. Now this married woman, Anne, she has a son, and her son is working in England. He's working on the railways. So my twice great-grandfather, late 1870s, he marries this woman, Anne, gains a stepson, and in 1879 the stepson makes a will. He leaves about £75 worth of property and £1,500 in a Liverpool dock bond. Remember, this is the 1870s, the 1880s. That's a heck of a lot of money, especially for someone working on the railways. But of course you know what happens, don't you? He dies. And how does he die, I hear you ask? Well, one night there's a terrible, terrible, terrible storm. The wind is howling like this swirling storm inside. No one can keep it in, and heaven knows they tried. But terrible, 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 frightening storm. And this man, this stepson, he's working on the railways. And there is a dreadful, 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 terrible accident. One of the railway carriages breaks loose. He's by the railway lines. He's hit by the railway carriage. And his head is knocked clean off. He has a son, but his son isn't that old. So all the money goes to his mother and his stepfather. Suddenly, my ancestor, Thomas, is a very wealthy man. Although, does he buy a mansion in the middle of the countryside with it? No, he stays quite humble. He carries on his job as a supervisor, a manager in the local glycerin refinery. Glycerin refinery, James? It's a bit of a strange kind of job, isn't it? Why might they be refining glycerin? Well, glycerin is a byproduct of the soap manufacturing industry. And in the 1880s, there was one primary use for glycerin, use for this byproduct: explosives. James, what is it with your family and dangerous flipping weapons? I mean, you've got a fucking bow. Your grandfather was driving a tank. There's shotgun-toting pub landlords. And now you're telling me your twice-great-grandfather was making explosives? Yeah, pretty much. Although they weren't using it for weapons. They were using it in industry, and particularly the slate industry. So there's a good chance that my great-grandfather made or helped to make the explosives that produced the slates in the North Wales slate quarries, which then went on to roof the world. What happens to the step-grandson, I don't know. But Anne, his wife, she dies in around 1897. Sad. So sad. It's a sad, sad situation. But what does our wealthy man Thomas go and do? He gets on a boat from Liverpool and he goes to the Isle of Man, to the north of the Isle of Man. And there he meets a widow with a son, a stepson. Sarah Jane Valjean, the lady who has previously been arrested for swearing. Her stepson, Robert Cassette, and his rumpy tomcat, who's winning awards. How they get together, I don't know. Perhaps he offers to help her look after the child, I don't know. Or perhaps she just sees a wealthy man and goes, hey, I'm in there. Either way, they're pretty soon back in Liverpool, getting married. We have a happy family of three. Sarah Jane Valjean, Robert Cassette, and Thomas. But it's not a happy ending. He goes back to the glycerin refinery, making the explosives. Sarah Jane Valjean has a daughter a few years later, my great-grandmother, who is named after her first husband's previous wife. But he's not happy because 1905, Robert Cassette's tragedy strikes. Robert Cassette dies at about the age of 21. He gets an illness. I think it might be one of those, well, it's either tuberculosis or one of those horrible, horrible Victorian diseases where your digestive system falls out your arse. But he dies young. It must have broken Sarah Jane Valjean's heart. Because here's the kid she was put on trial for. The kid she defended. The kid she brought up for 7 years on her own. Dies. And 10 years later, Thomas, who is by now a really old man for the period, about 80 years old, he dies as well. So it's just her daughter, who's named after her husband's previous wife. Gets even more tragic for Sarah Jane Valjean, because by the late 1820s she's suffering from a kind of Alzheimer's. She basically loses her memory. She suffers this horrible, horrible, debilitating brain disorder. Everybody dies. Well, of course, everybody dies in the end, but it's not a happy ending, is it? The only person who comes out of this happy is young Annie, who goes on to marry a Freemason and lives a long, 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 long life. Long enough to meet her great-grandson.